Today I want to go back to an old sketchbook of mine, almost 8 years old, where I learned perspective drawing and its basic concepts. I used Eric Olson's course on New Masters Academy, as well as How to Draw a book by Scott Robertson and a lot of different other sources. So it starts with the concepts, eye level, picture plane, line of sight, cone of vision, and so on. That's the first diagram that you see in Eric Olson's course, and we're going to see more than 100 diagrams here, explaining a little bit the idea in each one of those. So basically, understanding the relationship between the eye level and the horizon line and everything that is in it. So here with figures, as well as using transferring scales. This is an exercise that you see a lot in basic anatomy perspective courses all around, this kind of triangle transferring in perspective. I think this is important and this is an interesting approach, but I do feel that most courses kind of stay there and don't move forward. That's why I think the New Masters Academy course by Eric Olson is so good, because he goes way beyond. So here, trying to understand different angles and how to duplicate using the X kind of method in perspective, using diagonals and finding duplicates, as well as duplicating with spaces. So if you're drawing a train and you have spaces between wagons, you can do that kind of exercise, and it grows in complexity. All of these are from the diagrams in the course, so I wasn't drawing as much as I would like now looking back, from imagination and from copying from observation and trying to deconstruct from life. I should have done that way more than focusing a lot on diagrams. As I have a background in engineering, a lot of the technical terms go really well for me, so I've focused a lot on that. So the cone of vision, different relationships with the picture plane, and how far we are, what kind of lenses are we using for that specific scene, is something that I really learned from Eric Olson, and I think he has a great way of teaching that. This is basic construction. You see a lot of that in Gary Meyer's DVDs as well from Gnomon. But you see a lot of the concepts can be a little bland to some extent. He does a great job in bringing real world examples and analyzing old masters, analyzing photos, and so on. This is a great exercise to really understand the picture plane and different lenses. I think this is one of the best I've seen out there. So transferring scales, different figures. This is really important when you're drawing a complex environment. A lot of people don't check their scale, and it becomes weird. So more explorations now with slopes. So if you have like a beach or a mountain scene in different heights, how does that translate to what you're seeing in perspective? That's not easy to draw and to understand. So it's great to have a chance to really explore that in a lot of different diagrams. So more on scale and construction, setting up more formal constructions. So here I was exploring a little more of the line. This is one of a few approaches that I did more on a imagination kind of side. I would definitely correlate what I'm doing here, what we have in terms of content in books, with a lot of the tutorials out there. The Foundation Patreon is a great one. I talked about that in my video on drawing for concept art. As well, I'm putting together a video that might be coming out soon that will talk about perspective construction and how I would learn again if I needed to. So this is more of How to Draw a Book by Scott Robertson. If I'm not mistaken, this one is from Eric Olson once again, but there is a very similar one in Gary Meyer's course for Gnomon Workshop. So more and more examples, different 2-point cases when you have books going in a 1-point setup, in a 2-point setup, in the table in a different 2-point setup. So that's really important to understand multiple points, vanishing points. That's something that is really hard to grasp, to be honest, and something that will take a lot of time for your visual perception to really get there. I highly recommend using Blender or any other 3D software like SketchUp and so on to help you evolve your visual perception faster when you have a lot of different visual cues. So using real life examples, photos, artworks, as well as 3D will go a long way in helping really develop the visual perception and your technical skills as well. So both combined. Because if you rely too much on the formal approach, it can really stiffen your process. And everything you will need to construct, you can construct everything. Even in his DVD, Gary Meyer talks a lot about formal construction using measurements that are real. So if you need to do an elevation perspective visualization of architecture, a real architecture, if you're not doing that on 3D, you will probably have to go all the way with formal construction. So learning that is interesting, but nowadays I think having a lot of tools such as 3D will definitely help a lot, or starting from a photo and doing something different there. There are lots of options that don't go through the formal construction approach. So ellipses, another complex theme. So a lot of diagrams on that topic, both from Eric Olson and Scott Robertson. Staircase construction, like spiral staircase, and more explorations of angles in perspective. There is a lot of repetition, and I think that's really important so that a lot of those concepts are really understood, and you can definitely use them later on. So here more of a little bit of a distortion. This is a very good exercise to rotate formally in perspective. It will help a lot your visual perception to go on. So inclined planes, you find that both on Scott Robertson's, but especially on Frame Perspective 1 by Marcos Matteo Mestri, and as well as Eric Olson's course. So a lot of different exercises, different scales in perspective using inclined planes. So that's really important to understand if you have to build anything in perspective that has inclined planes, such as the roof of a house or any type of ramps, street scenes. If you're drawing in San Francisco, for example, you have a lot of slopes. So it's important to understand how scale correlates in those kind of situations. So this is a great example that you see in your screen. As I said before, more slopes, the roof of houses and staircases and so on. So a lot of repetition, but important repetition to really get your visual perception as well as your technical skills on the right place. Books, flipping pages in different directions using ellipses, and minor axis as the main construction point. I don't like those ellipses very much, to be honest. I think they could have been better in terms of degree as well as their minor axis. More houses and slopes, both in 2-point and 1-point perspective. It's not a 3-point situation. When I did this, I believe that the 3-point course was not ready yet for his. So gridding in inclined planes, that was an exercise. But I think the 3-point perspective by Eric Olson was not yet available. So I focused a lot on the diagrams that you have for the rest. So I really, really learned a lot from that. So more experiments from Scott Robertson's book. Weird distortions here and there. Mirroring. There are some interesting exercises, some failed attempts in there. 2 curve combos. So getting more and more complex with volume. And both Eric Olson and Scott Robertson are great references for that. The vanishing points are weird in those examples. So a lot of try and error, as I said, trying to have a grasp of the diminishing guidelines and vanishing lines to the horizon. And that comes with a lot of practice, more and more. Another spiral staircase, different sizes in different directions, just for experimentation. I love building staircases in perspective because it's technical, but it's beautiful at the same point. When you get that right, it's really interesting, the final result. Different directions. One of them, I think it's both of them are in a 1-point, but one of them is parallel. So you have to use parallel lines. And this is a 2-point view of the same type of staircase. It's not the same proportions, but really interesting. I love this diagram. Super fun to make and super fun to the final result. More construction, almost like a football field, kind of stadium. This is from Gary Meyer DVD. This is the basic construction of what he teaches. I didn't go all the way through completing the details. This is also, if I'm not mistaken, Gary Meyer from his second Neumann DVD. Or it's Eric Olson, I'm not sure, to be honest. This is Eric Olson now again, back to the diagrams from New Masters Academy. And there are lots of new things in the New Masters Academy course that I haven't seen, because it was after my subscription had expired, and I was pretty much done with studying perspective for a bit at least. I love those kind of architectural arches that go closer to Islamic art and Gothic. Bridges. There are great examples of bridges in Frame Perspective 1. So definitely check that out. More complex construction, two curve combos from Scott Robertson and Eric Olson as well. He goes into a lot of detail for complex forms as well. That's why how to draw book, I think it's so important. A lot of people don't want to study that, but understanding draw through and two curve combos, especially in complex volumes, will go a long way in your perspective drawing, even if you go into figures, animals, and so on. Having that visual perception and understanding of volumetric in 3D, this kind of exercises where you have two volumes connecting. I don't like the final result there, but it should have been smoother, as we can see in the example down below. It's way better. But this kind of cuts and intersection, it's the basis of dynamic sketching as well. So great exercises for understanding of volumes and their relationship in the three-dimensional space. So more examples, harder to build, so definitely way harder. But one interesting point to really talk about here is, as you can see, I wasn't doing a lot from imagination. This is mostly from the diagrams, and I wasn't doing that. It's not like I was doing that in another sketchbook or something like that. I just wasn't doing it. This is from Scott Robertson's book. More examples using minor axes and ellipses for car construction. So I was mostly doing what the books and courses were kind of bringing to me, and that's one of the big problems I see with my development as an artist as well. I became a great perspective teacher, but not a very good creative concept artist, concept designer, and illustrator, because I didn't use a lot of this in my own creations. So once again, from how to draw, complex constructions, I don't like some of the vanishing lines there, a lot of distortion. If you have the two vanishing points too close to each other, you have a lot of distortion. As we saw before in the lenses, it's almost like you have a wide fisheye lens, and it will start curving the perspective to some extent. This is great exercise. Like, it's the basis for boats and speedboat construction, yachts, and all of that. So it's great to do, but you have to use that. More Scott Robertson. So doing a lot of copies, using construction for that, but doing a lot of copies. Oh, this is from Gary Meyer. This is his second DVD. A lot of formal construction once again, but very interesting to have a grasp of volumetric, complex shapes in perspective. More houses and environments from Scott Robertson, and then it goes into his airplanes and cars. So we're gonna be seeing a lot of that in here. A lot of examples from the book. Those are hard to make and plot down. Wings are interesting. So if you haven't tried that, please do so. It will be an interesting exercise and exploration. So a lot of what's coming from his book, Scott Robertson. I do have a review for the book here, as well as the video that I talked before. Probably when you're watching this, it will have come out, and I'll definitely link in the end of the video so you can jump right into that if you enjoyed this one. So 3-point perspective, this is the start of 3-point perspective. 3-point perspective can get really, really complex. So have that in mind. I would rather go to 3D if I need to build a very complex scene in 3-point than having a construction. This is shadow projections. And finally, last but not least, some experiments from imagination and getting my lines better. These are the only ones that I did. So yeah, that wraps that up. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll definitely see you on another video down the line.